Welcome to People Skills. We've been in this series for the last few weeks, and we're learning about new ways to do relationships. And what the premise of this series is that all of us have rules for how we do relationships, and we don't know necessarily where we got them from. Some of us got them from our parents. We just sort of do what they did. We repeat history. Others of us, our parents are also involved in them. We do contrary to what we saw with our parents. In fact, this week at Thanksgiving, you made a point of, hey, I don't do things like you because I have a whole new set of rules. I do different, the exact opposite of you. But then, no matter where we got the rules or whether we even know what our rules are, when you become a follower of Christ, which most of us are that are joining in today, God says to you, hey, I want to give you some new people skills because I have a new rule for how you do relationships. And what God says to us is, I don't want you to just repeat history, or I don't want you to do anything contrary. I don't want you to do anything that's about what you've seen in other people. I don't want you to think about what other people deserve. Instead, the new rule is, I want you to do for other people what I have done for you. I want the lens through which you see your relationship with everybody else. I want you to do for them what I have done for you. Now, that's really tough because God has totally forgiven me. But I don't necessarily want to forgive you because you don't deserve it. God has totally accepted me even when I was unacceptable, but I don't want to accept you because you're not all that acceptable. God has included me. God has brought me into his family, but I don't want to include you because there's just something about you that bothers me. And I mean, that's really tough when you think about it. In fact, for some of you here that are not followers of Christ, when you hear that kind of thing, you think, well, I'm glad I'm not a follower of Christ because I don't want to have to do that. And I understand. And what I've been saying to you in this whole series is, if you're not a follower of Christ, everything we talk about, it applies to you, and it will help your relationships if you dare try them. But for those of us who are followers of Christ, God says to us, here's your new people skills. Here's the new rule. Do for other people what I have done for you. And there's something in us that says, hey, God, my relationship with you can be okay, and it doesn't really matter how I feel with other people. As I showed you in the very first week, we have this thought of, hey, God and I got it going on, and I got this great relationship with him, and I'm so thankful that God forgives me. But, God, I hate that guy. I don't like that guy at all. And God, I'm so glad for the way you accept me and you include me in things, but God, I don't want anything to do with them. And I'm thankful we have it going on and everything's good with us. And God says, look, you can't have it going on in your relationship with me and have it working right and not have it right with the people in your world. In fact, we said it this way. We said the depth and maturity of our relationship with God is measured by and seen in our relationships with other people. And that's what we've been talking about for the last few weeks. We talked about forgiving each other and accepting each other. And today, we're going to talk about that in a whole nother way. In fact, I want to read something to you today as we get into this next part of people skills, this new rule for relationships. And it comes from a book in the Bible that's called Galatians. And this is written by a guy named Paul, who we've already looked at in other places in the Bible. And his whole sort of life after he becomes a follower of Jesus is he goes around and helps other people become followers of Jesus. He starts these churches, and then he goes off to start more, and he writes letters back to these people so they can figure out how to follow Jesus. Now, this letter is written to a group of churches in an area called Galatia. Now, it doesn't exist anymore, but you think in terms of the area of Turkey. If you know about modern Turkey, in fact, Syria, where all the refugees we're hearing about so much these days are from, that's this area. In fact, the capital of Turkey today is the same capital as Galatia then. So Paul's talking to these particular people, and most of the people in these particular churches, they are former Jews, and they've been converted to Christianity, and they have this struggle of they always want to go back to the Jewish law. And in fact, there are Jewish teachers that come around, even after Paul has told them, look, no, you're saved by grace, and you're free from the law. There are other Christian Jewish teachers who come, and they teach, no, you have to be a good Jew, keep all the law, and then you can be a good Christian. But Paul consistently says to them, no, you are free from the law. In fact, that's what he writes to them. You are free from the law. Now, when he writes that to them, Jesus has fulfilled the law, he says, and you don't have to keep trying to keep the law. From now on, your focus should be on your relationship with God and then living that out with other people around you. You are free from the law. Now, when I hear free from the law, here's kind of the picture I have in my mind. I have the picture of the day that I got my driver's license, so many years ago, and I was totally alone in the family car. I was free from the law. No one was there to tell me what to do. You guys remember that? You remember what that was like that first day you're driving the family car and you're free from the law? Remember how slow and carefully you drove? Not me. I did not drive slow and careful. In fact, let me just put up this picture. This is the family car. This is not the exact car, but it's the model of car. This is a 1974 Chrysler Imperial. It has 440 cubic inches of V8 Detroit power. And when I got in that little puppy by myself, who knew that the family car would go that fast? It had that much power. That's the sense that most of us, when we read, I am free from the law, that's what we think of. Nobody has any bonds on me. I can do whatever I want to do, and I'll take total advantage of my freedom. Grace covers everything. I am free, 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 free. So Paul is writing to some people who are thinking, well, hey, we're free. That means I don't have to treat you nice because it doesn't matter anymore. I am free from the law that told me how to treat you. I don't have to do that. Well, Paul writes in this letter to address that, and he gets at today's people skill that we want to talk about. And I'll just say to you, this particular part is so powerful. I mean, if you're joining in and you have relational difficulties, which is all of us with somebody in your world, I'm telling you, if you're a person in that particular place and the forgive and accept stuff that we've talked about the last couple of weeks has been right where you are, this principle today is so powerful in that kind of place. Let me just read this to you. This is Galatians 5, verse 13. He says, you, my brothers, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the sinful nature. Just because you're free, do not give in to your own selfishness. Don't say, just because God isn't going to be mad at me or kill me or send me to hell if I don't treat you right, don't say, well, then I'm not going to treat you right. Now that I don't have to keep these rules, I'm not going to keep any of these rules. He says, now that you're free, now that you're free, you have an opportunity you didn't have before. Now that I don't have to do it anymore, now that I don't have to treat you a certain way, now there's an opportunity that I have that I didn't used to have when everybody knew I was commanded to do it. Now that I am free and under grace, I have an opportunity to do something for you that will have impact in our relationship. Now that I'm free, I have an opportunity, he says. Do not use your freedom to indulge the sinful nature. Rather, serve one another in love. Now that I'm free from the law that says I have to do nice things for you, now that you don't have to do it, now I have a chance. I can choose to move toward people that I have a difficult time with. Now I can move toward people who have hurt me. Now I can move toward people. I can choose to move toward people who are my enemy. Now that I don't have to do it, now I can freely choose to serve them. And you know what serve means, but just in case you don't, here's how we'll define it for this message. Serve means I see a need and I meet it. I see a need and I meet it. When there's something that needs to be done, you do it. Not because I have to. Not because it's required of me. Not because somebody's going to nail me for something that I didn't do. I choose to do it. Paul says, now that you're free, now you can choose, as you look at your relationships and you look at the ones that are difficult, you have opportunities to serve precisely because you don't have to do it. And as you do, you will take huge steps toward the other person relationally. And you will move away from, you serve me, or I do things the way I want them to do, or I am out of here. And you will kill that thing in you that says everything has to be my way. you will move away from that in the relationship. And then he goes on in the next verse and he says, the entire law. Now, the entire law would be like in the Old Testament, the whole book of Leviticus and Deuteronomy. In fact, sometimes people will say, I want to read through the whole Bible. And I go, well, Genesis is okay and Exodus is pretty good, but Leviticus and Deuteronomy will make you want to quit the whole thing because, it's just such incredible detail of all these little laws. Paul says the entire law is fulfilled in, the entire law is summed up in a single command that happens to be found in Deuteronomy: love your neighbor as yourself. He says all that stuff that you spent your whole life feeling like you had to do or God would be upset and trying to get right and you couldn't get right, he says now that you're free from the law, the whole law is summed up in this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. Now, fortunately, he nor Jesus says, like your neighbor. That's not what they tell you to do. You don't have to like your neighbor. He says, love your neighbor. Well, how do you do that? Well, you serve them. God, I'm having a problem with them, and God, I don't, God, if you would just heal my heart, heal how they've hurt me, God, heal my heart. God says, okay, serve them. No, God, change my heart, change the way I feel. God, change my feelings, change the way I feel. No, you serve them. I will serve them as soon as I feel like serving them. God says, no, serve them. He says, the entire law is summed up in a single command: love your neighbor as yourself. What does that look like? That means you see a need and you meet it. You see something that needs to be done and you do it. And then he gives us a contrast. He says, look, you don't have to do this. You don't have to go about it. You want to live another way? You can live the other way. You don't have to do this kind of thing. But you need to know, even though you're free, there are consequences to this. You're sowing seeds by doing this. You're actually producing something in the world by deciding to live the other way. So he says to them, you don't have to do it, but you just need to know what the consequences are. He says, if you keep on biting and devouring each other, watch out, or you'll be destroyed by each other. He says, look, you don't have to serve. You can keep on doing it just the way you are. You can keep on being like, it's my way, and I'm going to get my way, and I'm going to manipulate you, or I'm going to prod you, or I'm going to power up and get you to do my way, and I will convince and convict and control and leverage my power. And if I'm in a bad mood, everybody around me is going to have to pay, and I'll make sure that everybody walks around and gets my will done. He says you can continue to do that in your relationship if you want to. You can continue to allow your self-centered, that part in you that says, I got to have my way or I can't feel right. But just know, if you continue to bite and devour each other, don't be surprised that you consume each other. I'll say it to you another way. If you continue to only serve yourself, don't be surprised that you are all by yourself. If you continue to only care about yourself, don't be surprised that one day you're all by yourself. And some of you, come on, let's just be honest. Some of you, that's right where you are. Maybe not physically, because it's not always physically. Some people will stay with you, but you're alone emotionally. Some of you just this week spent time with people that you should be very close to, and you know you should be close to them, and you have a feeling of wanting to be close to them, but the whole thing has been about you, and you've only served you, and when you're with them, you feel alone. Some of you, if you're honest, you just have to say, we've all built our own little kingdoms in our family, and we all are separated off, and everybody's got to do my thing, or we can't get along, and I built my own little kingdom. They built their own little kingdom, and in my world, I'm alone. Some of you work in environments where nobody serves each other because you can't do that for other people, because then they'll be one up on you and they'll be better than you. And you work in an environment where everybody does their own little thing and there's no team. You're just alone. Paul says that's what happens. You let that internal thing in you that's just natural. You can see it in little babies. Give me what I want when I want it. I got to have it my way. It's got to be my way. And you refuse to do and meet the needs of the people that are around you, and meet the needs that you could easily meet. You refuse to serve people. You don't see a need and meet it. You serve yourself down that road. Go down that road. You are sowing seeds relationally in your life. If you only serve yourself, you'll be all by yourself. Again, if you're honest, that's where you are. That's where some of you are. And that word bite and devour that's in that verse, that's the word that they used in their day. That's the phrase they would talk about when they talk about dog fights. Now, some of you seen two dogs start to fight each other, and honestly, you can't even hardly break them up because they will destroy anything around them. Paul says, look, some of your relationships, that's the kind of dynamic in your relationships. In your relationship, if it's going to survive, if your relationships are ever going to get better, somebody is going to have to say, I'll serve. I will serve. I will see a need. I will see something that needs to be done, and I'll meet it. I see something that needs to take place, and I will serve you. Otherwise, you are just going to continue to self-destruct relationally. He says, I'll tell you, you know how you break out of that kind of thing where you just want to have it your way, and you think if I can just get it my way, I can have the life I want, but you get it your way consistently, and you don't have a life that anybody would want. He says, here's how you break out of that. You make a decision. You don't wait till you feel it. You don't wait till they move toward you. You make a decision. You decide, I will see a need and I will serve them. I will move toward them. I will see something that needs to be done and I will do it. I will fulfill the law even though I'm free from the law. I will move toward them and I will serve them. He says, this is the way he sums it up. He says, so I say to you, live by the Spirit of God. I'm not going to wait for God to change my heart. I'm just going to follow God, and I'm going to decide, live by the Spirit of God, and you will not gratify the desires of your sinful nature. In other words, as you continue to decide to follow God and to treat other people the way that He's treated you, He will lead you in the direction of serving other people. Now, let me just tell you why this matters so much. When we decide to serve somebody who's not on the same page, when we decide, when we've argued with and we are the enemy of and we have a bad attitude toward and we can't say anything nice about, when we decide, I'm not going to wait for God to change my feelings about, when I decide I'm going to serve them, we break the power of self-centeredness in our lives. Service is what damages and destroys self-centeredness in the life of a person. Just like if you know you're greedy and you have envy and you want greed to go down in your life, the way to get rid of greed in your life is give money away. You say to money, money, you do not control me, and I'll show you, I'll give you away. You want to deal with greed? Give money away. You want to deal with that thing in you that says, I recognize this nature in me that everybody around me has to make me happy and everything has to move toward me and everything has to be about me, and I thought if I could get everything about me, I'd have the life that I want, but I have a life that nobody would want. God, I need help with this. How do I get rid of this? God says, serve. You say to yourself, you will not be the master of me. And I'm not going to wait for my feelings to change. I'm not going to wait for them to move toward me. I will master my selfishness, so I will see a need and I'll meet it. I'll see something that needs to be done and I will do it. And every time you do, when you make that decision, one, you follow God, and two, we take a step toward breaking the power of selfishness in our life. You want to break self-centeredness that has destroyed relationships in your life your whole life long? Just haul on off and serve somebody. I mean, isn't it true? It is really difficult for you to be angry with somebody who consistently is serving your needs. And when we choose to serve, we turn in the other person's direction, when we move toward people who are enemies, when we move toward people we have difficulty with, no matter what the challenge, we say to each other, look, we are saying to our Heavenly Father, I will not allow my selfishness to rule me any longer. I will serve the other person in love, even people that have hurt me. Now, whenever I talk about something like this, it's the same kind of thing about what we talked about last week with forgiveness. And people, the questions afterwards and the emails afterwards and the notes that come in afterwards, they're always the same. In fact, some of you have already written this on the Frequently Asked Questions series coming up. You want an answer to this. The question is always this. This is the nature of the question. It's, Ed, how far do I have to go? I mean, how far do I have to go with this forgiving, serving thing? How far do I have to go in serving someone? And of course, the reason you ask that question is because you got a big old story. And you know, if I just give you the mic, or you could sit in your small group and you could tell your big old story, when you got to the end of your big old story, at the end of it, everybody would go, whew, you're right. You should not serve them. You shouldn't forgive them. You shouldn't more. They do not deserve it. You're right. See, there's just something in us that we want to know, when do I get a pass on doing this? When does this not count toward me? When do I not have to do this anymore? When does it not apply? When is the story so big? When is the hurt so deep? When do I not have to do this in relationship with other people? And let me just say to you what you already know, but you asked me because you're trying to make a point with me. Let me just say what you already know. You know I'm not smart enough to know the answer to that. I don't know whose story is big enough and who's deep enough. But let me tell you what I think of every time I'm trying to apply this to me, and when I think somebody's hurt me big. You want to know what I think of when I teach this concept? When I think this principle through, there is an account in the life of Jesus that always comes to my mind. And this account, at least for me, and maybe for you, maybe you don't know it, but for me, this account puts every one of my big old stories in the right context. And the account's found in one of the books that tells about Jesus' life. This is written by a guy named John. This is written like the last night before Jesus is going to be crucified. And Jesus' ministry is, for all accounting purposes, it's over on this earth. There's not going to be any more healings. He's not got much more teaching to do. He's not going to get to be with the people he's loved on this earth very much longer, and he knows it. And so he gathers together his 12 guys, the 12 guys that have been with him for 3 years, and among them, one of the guys that's there that night is a guy named Judas. And if you don't know, Judas has already decided before this meal that he's going to betray Jesus and hand him over to people who will ultimately kill him. And I don't know whether Judas knows that they're going to kill him or not, but here's what I do know. Jesus knows Judas has decided to do this, and Jesus knows that they're going to kill him. Among his number is not only Judas, there's another guy named Peter, and Peter, when he has an opportunity to stand up for Jesus after he's arrested, and Jesus just needs, you know how it feels just to have somebody stand with you. When Peter has the opportunity to do that, Peter denies that he ever knew Jesus. And the other 10 guys who'd been close to him, they all run away. So here's Jesus. He's got a betrayer, he's got a denier, and he's got 10 cowards. And it's him at this meal. And he knows all that's going on. And this is his final meal with him. Here's how John, who's one of the guys at the table, writes this. He says, "The evening meal was being served, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, that he had come from God and was returning to God." Now, let's just put that in your world for just a moment. You're at a meal and everybody's gathered around you, and it's everybody in your world. In your world, there's the person that betrayed you. They're at the table, and you know they betrayed you. There's the person that had a chance to stand up for you when that happened, and they didn't stand up for you. And then there's all the other people. They're just too cowardly to do anything, and they're gathered around you. And you know all of this took place, and in addition to that, you have the power to do whatever you want to do in that situation. You know, You've been given all power. You have all power to do whatever you want. God has given you absolute power to do whatever you want. He's put the authority in your hand. And by the way, the people who are going to betray you and deny you and the rest that leave you, they're being so nice to you, but you know what's right up ahead. What do you do? What do you do in that moment? And this is so incredible. This is Jesus' next move. In fact, the very next word is the word so, S-O. Because of that, because he knew that. Exactly because he knew that. Precisely because he knew that. He got up from the table, from the meal, took off his outer clothing, wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with a towel that was wrapped around him. Knowing that he had all power, knowing that he could do anything he wanted to do, and the traitors and the rebels and the people who were too cowardly to stand up for him are in the room, precisely because of that, Jesus served them. I'm telling you. When I'm in my time and it's my place and I'm in that situation, when it's my time and I know I have the opportunity and they're wrong, I'm telling you. You had those dreams I told you last week about having those conversations in my head where finally, everybody admits, Ed, you were right, and they're all begging for mercy, and I know it, and I can preach my sermon, I can put them in place, and I can punish them. What do I do in those moments? Serving them is the furthest thing from mine. Serving them up is in my mind, but not serving them. Jesus serves them. And then he interprets this event for them in verse 12 of John 13. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes, returned to his place. Do you understand what I've done for you? He asked them. I mean, can you imagine being Jesus at that moment? Can you imagine being Judas at that moment? In many ways, I feel bad for Judas. And Judas is sitting there, and he knows he's going to betray, and he can see in Jesus' eyes that Jesus knows that he's going to betray him. And he just washed your feet. Can you imagine being in that place? Do you know what I've done for you? Jesus says. And I imagine this long pause, and then he says, you call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that's what I am. Now that I, your teacher and Lord, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. He gathers the betrayer and the denier and all the cowards who are going to leave him into one room. And because he knows what they're going to do, he serves them. And then in a few hours, he serves them again by dying on a cross for the betrayer and the denier and all of their cowardice. And he said, hey, I'm giving you an example. I want you to go out and do for everybody in your world what I have done for you. I want you to leverage the freedom I have by the grace that I've given you. You don't have to do it. I want you to leverage the freedom. You now have an opportunity to move toward the people who hurt you. Precisely because you can do it, but you don't have to. You have an opportunity. See a need and meet it. Figure out what needs to be done and then do it. Not because they deserve it, but because I have done this for you. Now, isn't that the most unbelievable thing that you've ever heard? Because every once in a while in your life, and sometimes for many of you every day, every week, it happens to you, but for most of us, every once in a while in our life, we're in that scary strategic place where we have the power, and we're right, and we've been hurt, and we are the ones that are wrong, and we have the authority, and the enemies are gathered, and everybody's around us, and everybody who's disappointed us is right there. It's our move. And it's not that you avoid confrontation. Don't hear me say you don't confront. It's not that you don't correct what's gone wrong. It's not that you don't discipline if you're in a parenting kind of situation. I'm saying in those moments, with all the other complicated stuff that's going on, at least at some point you ask yourself the question, what do they need? What is it they need? And how could I meet that need? What is it that they need done for them? And how could I do it? See, in a church like ours, there's always something going on. There are people here today, and you've had a business deal, and somebody stabbed you in the back, and their family deals, and their church deals with people that we sit in church together. You can't even look at the other person. There's conflict, and everybody's jockeying for position, and everybody's trying to figure out who's going to be on top, and everybody's trying to coerce and get everybody on their side, and that kind of thing. What if in the midst of that, you stepped back and you found a way to serve? You saw a need and you met it. I mean, it may never be recognized. It may never be applauded. They may never show any gratitude for what you've done, but when you do that, you cooperate with your Heavenly Father and you do for other people what He did for you. You serve the betrayer and the cowards and the ones that are your enemies. You serve them in love. And you fulfill the whole law. So let me ask you, and I'll do this in the form of next steps. So if you'd go ahead and grab one of these cards that we talked about earlier, and if you haven't already, put your name and maybe a number we could text you or an email, just a way we could contact you. Nothing odd's going to happen. And if you're our guest today, we're so honored you came and gave time to be a part of this today. And maybe the only thing you can say is, hey, I'll come back. I don't even know what I think about all this. I don't know if I believe any of this, but hey, I'll come back. Or maybe you're from out of town and you're just with family. And in your next step, because you don't even live here, just say, hey, I'll continue to pursue. I can sense that God is up to something in my life, or something's happening. I feel drawn to know more. I'll come back. If you'll put your name and a way we can contact you, we'll help you with that in any way we can. We'll certainly pray. We pray for every one of these cards that gets turned in. But for the rest of us that are here and we're followers of Christ, can I ask you in the form of a question, could I just ask you to consider, do you have an enemy? And maybe you wouldn't call it that. Do you have people that you don't like? Is there somebody that's hurt you? Serve them. Go to somebody in your life that hasn't done for you what you were owed, what you were deserved. What if you served them? I mean, what if that was the next step you checked on here? Let me just get real practical on this. What is it in your home that needs to be done, that everybody knows needs to be done, but nobody wants to take the shot to do it? What if you decided, I'll serve everybody in my family? Even though I don't have to, I'll serve the people in my family. It's not really anybody's responsibility, but it needs to be done, and I'll do it. Here's something that somebody who's listening is dying for me to say. Some of you here, somebody in your family's been serving you consistently for a long, long time, and they've waited, and you never, ever, ever returned their service. You're nice, but you don't serve. And everybody in the family knows it's got to all be about you. It's got to all go your way. You haven't ever served. You haven't ever recounted. It all has to be about you. Some of you are sitting here, and there are people in your world that are 30 minutes away from walking into your office or walking into the living room or walking into the bedroom and saying to you, I'm done. I'm done. It's been all about you. You only served you, and now you only have you. They don't want to say it, but they can't get you to wake up. They can't get you to see what's going on. And you become so self-absorbed that all you're going to eventually have is you. And these are people that you'd say you deeply love, but you've not loved them by serving them. You feel it in your heart, but they can't see your heart. They only see what you do. Would you take the next step? Would you begin to serve them? When you do, you honor your Heavenly Father, and you do for them what He does for you. In fact, this is the way that Jesus said it about Himself. Jesus said, I did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give my life for many. And then He looks at me, and He looks at you, and He says, now you go and do the same for everybody in your world. Let's pray. Father in heaven, thank you for the opportunity we have to know you. That only comes because you were willing to serve us, that you looked at our need and you said, I can meet that. I will meet it. And even though we turned our back, and even though we betray you, and even though we deny you, and even though we don't do what you ask us to do, and even though we don't return the love that you've given to us, you continue to serve us. Father, would you help us to learn your new rule of doing for other people what you have done for us, and in this one area, would you help us to serve? Thank you for Jesus, who served us to the point that He gave His life on a cross for us. Thank you for that service to us. In His name I pray. Amen.